Bonjour tout le monde, Éric Vanhove de Passion Whisky Québec. Abonnez-vous à la chaîne YouTube. À chaque semaine, des nouveaux vidéos seront mis en ligne concernant le monde du whisky. 6e vidéo cette semaine. Je commence par vous dire que le groupe de commandes du Old Grandad et du Belgian Old sont terminés. Les groupes sont fermés. Alors, on va recevoir les commandes dans les prochaines semaines. Cette semaine, comme promis, je vous présente l'entrevue que j'ai faite avec Iain Forteath, le brand ambassadeur ou l'ambassadeur de marque, si vous voulez, de Glencadam et de Tomintoul. Juste avant, je vais vous faire un rappel. Il y a les deux formations sans ce whisky à Rimouski et à Montréal qui sont actuellement en ligne. Vous pouvez aller prendre votre place. Il y a seulement 20 places dans chacune des formations, alors dépêchez-vous, les places se prennent rapidement. Alors, je vous laisse avec l'entrevue de Iain Forteath. Et pour ma part, je viens de recevoir un whisky québécois ici, l'édition limitée, la première bouteille de whisky de la maison Lafrance. Donc, je vais goûter à ça puis je vous en reparle dans les prochaines semaines.
Hi there, my name's Iain Forteath and I'm the Global Brand Ambassador from Angus Dundee Distillers based in Scotland. We're a family-owned distilling company and we own two distilleries in Scotland, Tomintoul, based up in Speyside, and also Glencadam, based in the Highlands. Tomintoul Distillery was founded in 1965 in the Glenlivet estate up in Speyside. We're actually in the middle of the Cairngorm mountain range, and we were established there because, number one, it's very kind of open and wild, so the air quality is very good for our warehousing. But also we're based on a mountainside where we have the Ballantrae spring, which is our water source for our distillery. The distillery being built in 1965 is really quite interesting because until recently it was classed as a modern distillery. There was a real resurgence of kind of whisky curation and whisky distilling in the 60s, and we're very much of its time. So Tomintoul is very much of its era. And the reason I say is we used to be classed as a modern distillery is now with the recent kind of boom in artisanal distilling or small batch distilling, we've now kind of become a little bit antiquated compared to the new distilleries out there. It's interesting because, as you may know, the whisky history has peaked and troughed over time, and Tomintoul has survived that, luckily, I suppose. So when there was the closures in the 80s, a lot of these distilleries were either surplus or they were distilleries that were maybe a little bit dated, and unfortunately many of them were kind of closed or demolished. Tomintoul, being built with kind of modern technology of its time, I suppose kept its head above the water. So it's done pretty well. It's had a couple of owners throughout history, and Angus Dundee Distillers bought Tomintoul in the year 2000. Being built in the 60s, blending was the main kind of output for single malt spirit. So Tomintoul in the past has appeared in a lot of blends, it still does. It's only really been established as a single malt brand with us taking it on board in the year 2000. So in terms of production size, Tomintoul is, I suppose, a medium-sized distillery. It has two sets of two stills, although our stills at Tomintoul are really big. They are not just tall, but they're also very wide, so you get lots of copper contact during the distillation process, and that gives you the kind of lighter style of spirit. So Tomintoul annual production is coming out about 3.4 million litres per year. A lot of that is used in blending and reciprocal trading. The Ballantrae spring is our water source at Tomintoul. It comes off of the hillside beside us. It's also the name of our heavily peated product, so we make a whiskey there called Old Ballantrae, and Old Ballantrae is a heavily peated Tomintoul, which we make for only 5 weeks per year. So yeah, available at the moment in SIQ, we have the Tomintoul 16-year-old. There's also the Tomintoul Peated Tang, and that's a lightly peated Tomintoul. So they're the two expressions currently available. However, we're hoping to get a few more listings as well, and you'll maybe see a few more expressions from us coming out in the not too distant future. So the Tomintoul 16 is probably my favorite whiskey in the Tomintoul range. It's definitely the one I drink the most. It's just a cracking, well-rounded dram. Tomintoul is known as the gentle dram, which is like a Scottish slang term for a smooth, rounded, easy-drinking whiskey, I suppose. And we kind of make a whiskey that's very creamy and nutty and sweet. So it's well-balanced, it's got good flavour and structure, but it's also not too aggressive and not too spicy. The 16-year-old is matured entirely in ex-bourbon casks, and that married with our fruity and kind of nutty Tomintoul spirit gives us this beautiful creme brulee, sweet, kind of nutty style of whiskey, which I just love. I nickname it my breakfast dram because it's really easy to drink, although it's got great flavour and great structure at the same time. Our other distillery that we own is called Glencadam Distillery, and Glencadam is a beautiful place to visit. It's very different to Tomintoul. It's based in the Highlands for a start, but actually the main difference is that unlike Tomintoul, which was built in 1965, Glencadam was built in 1825, so it's a totally different style of production. We touched on earlier about the kind of turbulent times of whiskey. And Glencadam, quite amazingly, has survived all of that. It was burnt down twice and rebuilt because the spirit quality at Glencadam has always been recognized for its really kind of unique flavor characteristics. So Glencadam was acquired by Angus Dundee in 2003. It was actually wound down by its previous owners, Domaine Distillers, who closed the door in the year 2000. And we were quick to try and pick that up before it ended up like many other distilleries of its era. Glencadam is really cool. It's a very small distillery in comparison to Tomintoul. And it just has 2 stills, so just one set, and we produce there 24/7, which gives us enough liquid to supply the world, but it's not large by any means. Because of its kind of fruity character, it gives a real nice kind of highlight to a blended whiskey. So there's a high demand from other companies and other kind of blend producers that want some Glencadam, even just to use a tiny percentage of in their recipes. So Glencadam is in quite high demand, although we try to keep as much for single malt as we can. The spirit of Glencadam is quite different to the Tomintoul that we talked about. Tomintoul is very kind of nutty and soft. Glencadam is the other way around. It's really tangy and really fruit forward. In fact, the new make, I always say, smells a bit like pineapple juice. It's really fresh and different. We put that into casks. It gives us a really cool character. Not necessarily the most mainstream whiskey style. It is a bit more obscure, but it's very true to itself and very true to kind of its kind of location as well, based in the Highland region, but more specifically the East Highlands and Angus, which used to be their own little whiskey mecca of its day. The one I've got to show you is again a personal favourite in the Glencadam range. This is Glencadam 15-year-old. This is like liquid rice pudding in a glass. It's a 100% bourbon cask, and this whiskey is thick, rich, and creamy. It's got this nice kind of apple flavour to it, the kind of cooked apple sort of texture, and there's really oily viscosity as well. So it's a real kind of heavyweight Highland style. No peat in there. It's a 100% bourbon cask as well. But it punches way above what you'd maybe expect from a bourbon matured whiskey. It's a real cracker. This isn't available yet, but I'm hoping we can reintroduce it. Glencadam 15-year-old actually disappeared from the market for a couple of years. The reason for that is, as I mentioned, the distillery was closed from 2000 to 2003. So there was a 3-year production gap between us buying the distillery from Allied. So the 15-year-old disappeared for a while, although it was a real fan favourite. But it's now been back for the last few months, so we're hoping to establish that back in Canada as well and bring it back out again and show people what Glencadam has to offer as well. So yeah, there's quite a diverse range amongst each. Not all available here in Quebec, but if you search, you can find a few different releases from both distilleries. Tomintoul, along with the 16-year-old, I also love. We make a sherry cask, which is a 12-year-old. So it's 10 years matured in bourbon, finished for 2 years in Oloroso sherry butts. It tastes like milk chocolate, fruit and nut. It's really delicious, nice and kind of sweet and a bit sultry. In the Glencadam range, actually, the 10-year-old is classic. If you've never tried it before, it's a really distinctive tasting whiskey. The 10 is like aperitif whiskey. It's almost like a white wine of the whiskey world. So unlike the 15, which is very thick and rich, the 10 is very crisp and fresh, but a really unique tasting single malt. So definitely worth finding. If I was throwing my money around, the Glencadam 21-year-old is absolutely stunning. It's like a hug in a glass. It's kind of proper old school, kind of slightly musty single malt, but really, really brilliant, in my opinion anyway. Tomintoul, if you want to go for the kind of more age categories, Tomintoul 18-year-old I love. I actually had a hand in making that as well, so I have a little bit of bias towards it, I suppose. Tomintoul 25 as well is stunning. It's really biscuity and rich. And a real kind of nice expression of older spirit from the distillery also.
Merci d'avoir écouté cette 6e vidéo de Passion Whisky Québec. Il y a d'autres entrevues qui s'en viennent, d'autres informations, d'autres nouvelles dans les prochaines vidéos. Alors pour ne rien manquer, suivez la chaîne de Passion Whisky Québec en vous abonnant. N'oubliez pas de cliquer sur la petite cloche pour avoir les alertes quand il y a une nouvelle vidéo. Vous pouvez suivre aussi Passion Whisky Québec sur YouTube, Instagram et Facebook. Merci, à la prochaine!